So today's episode, I want to talk to you about milestones and sort of this idea of advocating for yourself and bragging, and how do you share about these big milestones or like these big results that you get for your team, or perhaps you hit a marker, you reached your goal, and you know that it's important to kind of tell other people that you reached your goal, but you don't know how to do it. And the reason that I'm talking about today's episode in particular at this moment in time is actually because last week I launched my 300th podcast episodes. 300. This is huge. And guess what happened? I recorded the podcast episode last week. I made zero mention of it being my 300th episode. My business manager Slack messages me and says, "Congratulations on your 300th episode." I went, "Oh yeah, that was my 300th episode. I should do something about that." And that's what today's podcast episode is about. Like, should we do something about that? Should we tell other people? Should we celebrate ourselves, even if in private? Like, what does advocating for ourselves, sharing about our milestones, sharing what we're proud of really, really mean? And what's truly, genuinely authentic to ourselves? And also the journey, the evolution that we go through as women leaders in terms of this self-advocacy, and how in one sense it gets easier over time to do, because for me to talk about my 300th episode is just like, first of all, it completely blows my mind. And I'm also just like so proud. And of course I'm going to talk about it if I can remember. But my 50th episode, I did a whole hoopla. Like, it was very different when I celebrated my 50th episode than my 300th episode. So I want to tell you about that journey, and also the journey that I see for a lot of the women when it comes to self-advocacy. So let's go back in time. I remember when I launched my podcast, and I was very nervous about it. And I recorded those episodes. They were grand total of 10 minutes long. The entire episode was scripted. I read it verbatim, which none of those things I do now. But back in the day, that first episode took me so long to create. I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what I wanted to say in that LinkedIn post and actually tell people that I had a podcast. But part of me didn't want people to come to my podcast, because that would mean they actually had to listen to me, and just sort of wondering like, oh, I hope this works out. I hope I record more episodes. I hope I still have a podcast in the next few weeks if I'm sending everybody here. Just all of those things that come up when you start something new. And I see this a lot for women when they get a job offer or a promotion. And they'll do a very typical job post because it's kind of easy. LinkedIn has some templates for that. And you'll say something like, "Hey, I got a promotion. Thank you all so much for this opportunity. I'm really excited for what's next." And it's a simple, easy way to advocate for yourself. And it feels incredibly uncomfortable. Maybe you never, ever, ever post on LinkedIn. This is like the one post that you did. It's because you have to, you feel like you should. I'm talking about the evolution, and when those first, like that first self-advocacy, that first bragging, that first like putting it out there. And what can happen, and this, I'm just sharing this with you on my podcast journey, is that you did it. Like, you accomplished it. It was hard. You were like, okay, done. Hopefully people come. Hopefully people comment. Oh, wow, that was nice. I heard from people I haven't heard from in years, whatever. But you feel like you ripped the Band-Aid off and you did it. Now, fast forward a year or 6 months, and you haven't talked about anything. You haven't bragged about anything. And this happened to me. So 50 episodes would be almost a year of having my podcast. And, I have a team, and sometimes my team will post about my podcast because I tell them to, but just this idea of actually sharing what it was that I was working on, I never really got into like a really strong momentum of sharing. And that's really common because when you're first starting out, it can feel like, yes, I have something to say. Yes, I have something to celebrate, but I don't really know how to do it. And am I doing it right? But the good news is I did it anyway. I made the first post. A few people listened to my podcast. Luckily I have a team, so even more people started listening to my podcast. I got more and more comfortable with sharing about the work that I'm doing. I also started to see big results, right? So every single day, if I'm talking to a client and they're like, "Oh my God, Stacy, you're not going to believe what happened when I did or said exactly what you told me to say." And I'm like, "Yeah, of course, this process works." And so then again and again and again, we start getting results, bigger and bigger and better things happen, and so on, right? So it's really important to recognize that, you're getting out there, you're getting, like, your leadership matters, the conferences that you're speaking at. It's important that people hear about this, right? And it feels good to you. And so then you share a little bit more and more and more. So that is very normal, very common. And then my 50th episode came around, and it was kind of similar to my first episode. I had a big contest. I had to force myself to share with other people. And I put it out there, and I was like, "All right, everybody, listen to my podcast." And then slowly, episode 300, what's happening for me is episode 300 was 150% inevitable. This is very different than where I was in the beginning. So I was efforting to do the work that I was doing. It required effort. It required work. You had to think about the strategy. You had to figure out what to say and when to say it. But in the evolution of women's leadership, our voice becomes less effortful, right? It's just easy. It's easy to share. It's easy to talk about ourselves. So much so that by the time we make it to our 3X vision, or we finally get that C-suite title, or we land that board seat, it's effortless. So much so that we forget about it. We forget to tell people. We do a 300th episode and we go, "Oh my God, 300 episodes. This is a really big deal. Oh my God, I'm in the C-suite." I remember the day when that was just a dream, right? Like I thought, someday I might actually have a voice at the table. Someday I might be in the management team. And now I'm there and I forget to tell anybody about it. This is actually a good thing, right? This is a different kind of self-advocacy. And chances are really good that you're listening to this and you fall somewhere in the middle, right? Where, it definitely doesn't feel effortless what you're doing, but yet you do feel more confident in sharing and so on, and talking about your accomplishments and owning it and asking for a raise and making sure that you're actually set up for your next promotion. So my 300th episode came and went. And then I was like, "Oh my gosh, I should do an episode about my 300th episode." Right? And so I do it, right? I'm having this conversation with you right now. Same thing can happen where, in the beginning you were like, "I got this promotion, congratulations to me." And then, fast forward 5 years and now you're just talking about being in the C-suite. You're just sharing with people. Maybe you're starting your own podcast. Maybe you're willing to go up to your boss and own some of the wins that you've had. And so this is the idea of self-advocacy over time, is that it does become easier. But how do we get there? If you're still in that beginning phase where you're like, "I don't even want to post about my job offer or my promotion on LinkedIn, and this feels really hard," that's quite literally the answer. You have to take that first step. You have to. I shouldn't say have to, because that feels a lot like I'm telling you what to do, but I encourage you to take that first step. If you want to become that person that is very effortless in sharing about their thought leadership, in sharing about some of their accomplishments, it doesn't sound like bragging. It doesn't sound like their ego. It just sounds like they love what they do. If you want to become that person who has 300 podcast episodes and forgets that she has them and then has to record an episode at episode 301, where she talks about her previous episode, if you want to become that person, then you start. That's it. You take that first step, you do that first post, you send that direct message, you share about something that you accomplished, you share that the boss's boss's boss actually gave you a compliment, and you actually tell your boss that that happened. And yeah, it's going to feel really uncomfortable. It's going to feel very effortful. But the thing is that unless we start this process, unless you start to rip off that Band-Aid, unless you start to say, hey, I'm willing to talk about what matters to me in leadership and actually share that I'm a vice frickin' president at this organization with anybody, share with anybody that your leadership matters and what you're working on. It starts with starting, right? And that might look like a lot smaller than you wish. It might look a little bit like I should be doing more. All I did is one post or whatever, or all I did is tell one person, and who cares, right? But that is not true. It matters to share about your accomplishments. It matters to start. It matters if you ever want to be that effortless person that just is at the C-suite. That's huge, right? We want other people to be proud of us. It matters. Your leadership matters. You did so much work to get exactly where you are today. And other people deserve to celebrate that, to know about that. And then now you can inspire other people to take that first step, to begin to elevate their own leadership, to begin to share about their own process. And the next thing you know, you're going to have a goal of giving one talk in 2026, and that turns into 10. The next thing you know, you're going to be referred to as a thought leader or a super expert in your industry. You're going to be given promotions without asking. You're going to be given job opportunities while you're sitting in your dream job. These are actual things that are happening for my clients on a regular basis, right? And I forget to share with you those wins. I forget too. But the point is that I've arrived. I want to own that I've arrived. I have accomplished. I no longer have to prove myself or say, hey, listen to me. I don't have to shout anymore. I just am. I am a woman with over 300 podcast episodes and something to frickin' say about what it takes for you to get promoted into higher level executive leadership. I am a woman who has accomplished great things. My daughter and my son might not be able to describe what the heck I do besides Zoom calls, but they know that it's important. They know that my work matters, and they know that every single day that I'm going to work, that I have something to say, and that matters. And that's available to you. That's available to you right now. Figure out what that first step is. I encourage you to share it because I want your voice out there, and I want to celebrate you for having that voice. Right? I know it's difficult. I know it can feel really hard and very scary at first, but I promise you it's just the first step. And before you know it, you will have arrived as well.